I hadn't been back to Wheaton in almost 2 years, not since Mom passed and left her house to be shared peacefully between her daughters. At least that's what the will said. Peace had never been Kaylin's priority. Control was. But as I stepped out of the rideshare that dropped me in front of her pristine suburban home, suitcase in hand, I told myself not to assume the worst. I told myself she'd let me in. Fallen leaves scattered around the porch steps like a warning. Autumn in Illinois had a way of looking beautiful even when something was wrong. I paused at the door, key in hand. It was still the one Mom had given me, back when this house still felt like home. I tried the key once, then again. Nothing. It didn't fit anymore. I stood there in my jacket, the wind biting through the fabric like it knew I didn't belong. A porch light flickered on inside, motion activated, illuminating my confusion. I twisted the key again, slower this time, like finesse would solve the betrayal. It wouldn't. I knocked, twice, waited, no answer. For a moment, I just stood there, thinking maybe she wasn't home. Maybe it was all a misunderstanding. But then, behind the half-drawn living room curtains, I saw her shadow pass by. And behind her, a glimpse of Solana, my daughter, my little girl. Solana sat slumped in her wheelchair near the window, her face turned toward the darkened street. Even from where I stood, I could see her shoulders trembling. She was crying. I forgot the key, forgot the cold. I stepped back, squinting through the curtain as best I could. Her hands were curled in her lap, her cheeks blotched. No one knelt beside her. No one comforted her. Then came the voice from inside, Thorne's, "Shut up and leave," loud, sharp, unmistakable. And then Kaylin's response, too loud, too smug. Finally, someone said it. The porch light hummed. My body didn't move, but something inside me cracked, the kind of break that doesn't make a sound but changes everything. I didn't scream, didn't knock again. My eyes were locked on my daughter, her sobs muffled behind expensive windows, sealed shut to keep people like me out. My mind spun. Last year, Kaylin promised me, "You'll always have a room here, no matter what." We'd stood in this exact spot. She smiled then, that performative sweetness she mastered so well. Maybe she meant it for someone else. Maybe she never meant it at all. I reached for my phone. No service. Of course. For a second, I imagined yelling, banging on the door, forcing my way in. But what would Solana remember? That her mother screamed like a madwoman? Or that no one opened the door? I walked to the window, close enough to see Solana clearly. She was still crying, still alone. I raised my hand to the glass, softly, a silent wave. Her head turned, slowly, eyes red. Our gazes locked for less than a breath, and then she looked away. My hand dropped. Inside, Thorne poured himself a drink. Kaylin laughed at something on her phone. And me? I stood on that porch, invisible. I turned around, picked up my bag, and walked back down the steps. No yelling, no scene. Just a door that used to open, and now didn't. Back on the street, the rideshare driver had barely moved. I slid back into the car. The driver didn't ask what happened. Maybe he saw enough in my face. "Where to?" he asked. I opened my mouth, closed it, then said, "Just drive for now." We pulled away from the curb. I didn't look back, because I knew I wasn't just locked out of the house, I was locked out of her life. The car hadn't even made it out of the cul-de-sac before I stepped back onto the sidewalk. My hand trembled, not from fear, but from restraint, like every nerve in my body had been yanked tight and told not to scream. I walked back up the path, slow and steady, carrying nothing but my pride and the memory of Solana's tear-streaked face. I knocked again, firmer this time. No games. I wanted them to see me, to acknowledge what they had just done. The door creaked open, halfway. Thorne filled the frame, arms crossed, eyes dead behind polished politeness. He looked at me like he didn't know who I was. "You don't belong here," he said, calm as a courtroom bailiff. "Shut up and leave." Behind him, Kaylin's voice floated in, airy and cruel. Finally, someone said it. I froze. There was no shouting match, no explanation, just the sound of a wine glass clinking against her ring, followed by a slow clap, measured, like I had just performed some final act of disgrace. "You've got a nerve, Vela," she added, laughing like we were all in on a joke. Showing up here like it's still your place. I took one step back, not out of submission, but to take in the entire scene, the lights, the faces, the house that used to be mine in the ways that mattered. I had a key, I said quietly, to no one in particular. Guess that doesn't mean much anymore. Thorne didn't budge. Kaylin leaned on the doorframe now, wineglass in hand, her posture relaxed like she'd been waiting for this moment. You're not the mother she needs, she said. You're a reminder of everything broken. From the living room, Solana turned her head just slightly toward the door. She couldn't hear me. She hadn't heard me the last time either, but she saw me, and worse, she saw them. You really should go, Thorne added. This isn't helping her. No one mentioned what was helping her. No one said why she was crying. I nodded once, just once, and turned to leave. As I reached the bottom step, something caught my eye near the edge of the porch. A sodden mess, mostly brown now, with a faint pink ear poking out. Solana's stuffed rabbit, the one she named Peach when she was 3. She used to drag it everywhere. It was soaked, stomped on, discarded like it had outlived its usefulness. A part of her childhood left in the mud. I stared at it. That bear was more than a toy. It was what she held when I couldn't hold her. When the hospital visits got too long. When I had to work doubles. When bedtime had to be kissed through video calls. I didn't pick it up. I didn't need to. It had already told me everything I needed to know. Funny, I muttered, mostly to myself. In families like ours, things don't get lost. They get thrown out. I stood there another moment, letting the shame wash over me. Not mine, theirs. My presence was an inconvenience, my grief a blemish on their curated life. They didn't even bother to whisper the cruelty. They said it loud and proud, like it had been rehearsed. And Solana, she turned her wheelchair away from the window. That hurt. More than the key. More than the clap. But it wasn't her fault. When a child watches love be edited out of their life, they start thinking it was never there. I stepped off the porch slowly, eyes scanning the house like I was committing it to memory. Because I wasn't going to scream, I wasn't going to beg. I memorized the faces, the furniture placements, the slip in Thorne's voice when he tried to sound legal, the curve of Kaylin's smile when she knew she'd gone too far and liked it. You only clap at the end of a show. I hadn't even started my act. I walked to the sidewalk, my shoes crunching on gravel. One more glance over my shoulder, not at them, but at the girl behind the glass. They thought I left empty-handed. But I left with everything I needed. I didn't sleep. My body lay still, but my mind kept circling back to that image. Solana, crying behind glass. I could still hear Kaylin's smug clap echoing in my skull. And that stuffed animal, soaked and discarded. It wasn't just hers. It was mine too. Proof of all the nights I stayed up working double shifts just to afford the therapy bills. Evidence of love in cotton and thread, now tossed like we were trash. By morning, I had driven myself to a small cafe near the courthouse. Nothing fancy, just quiet. The kind of place where people sip bitter coffee and try to forget who they used to be. I sat in the back booth, a chipped mug warming my palms, staring at a weathered cardboard box I had pulled from the back of my car. It held my past, the real one. Medical receipts, school notes, therapy schedules, even sketches Solana had drawn from her hospital bed. At the time, I saved them out of sentiment. Now, they were ammunition. As I flipped through the stack, something odd caught my eye. A pediatric intake form, routine stuff. Except in the top corner, under primary guardian, the handwriting wasn't mine, it was Kaylin's. At first, I thought it was an admin error, but the more I looked, the more I saw. My name scratched out, her signature bold and clean. The date, just 2 weeks after Solana's accident. The devil is in the details, my old supervisor used to say. And this detail screamed. I stepped outside to call the clinic. The receptionist transferred me to someone in records who spoke in a voice far too cheerful for what she was about to tell me. Our files show Miss Kaylin Voss as the sole medical decision-maker for Solana Mercy, she said. I pressed the phone tighter. There's no secondary listed? No biological parent? None noted. I didn't argue. What was there to say? "Thank you for confirming my sister erased me." I asked them to email me a copy of the file. When she asked why, I said, "Because I'm about to correct it." Then I hung up. Back in my car, I dug through the glove box, looking for tissues, anything. Instead, I pulled out something wrapped in a soft cloth. Mom's old journal. I had completely forgotten it was there. She gave it to me the day after Solana's second surgery. The day she told me, "Write it down, Vela, or you'll start believing their version." I unwrapped the cover carefully. The smell of old ink and worn paper hit me like a memory. The pages were filled with her slanted cursive, grocery lists, family recipes, quotes from books. And then, on a page near the center, I found it. "Vela is soft, but she's the one who never let go of me, even when I let go of myself." My throat clenched. All those years, Kaylin was praised for being organized, successful, polished. Mom still saw me, not for what I achieved, but for what I endured. Sometimes the loudest praise is the kind whispered to no one else. That afternoon, I sat at the desk in my tiny rental unit, lit by a crooked lamp and surrounded by silence. I began building my own archive, scanning documents, saving voice messages, labeling everything with dates, times, names. Every moment Kaylin thought she was covering her tracks, I was reconstructing the road. If she wanted to play the long game, then I'd let her. But I had changed the board. This wasn't rage. I didn't need rage. I had receipts. I bookmarked the contact page of a family law firm I'd heard good things about. I didn't call yet. I didn't need to, not yet. First, I had to finish gathering. Quiet isn't weakness. Quiet is loading. They forged a paper trail. I was about to lay mine, brick by brick. 4 days had passed since I saw my daughter through glass and heard the door shut in my face. I hadn't called. I hadn't begged. I'd learned early that silence sometimes echoes louder than screaming. That's why when Kaylin sent an unexpected text inviting me over for lunch, just us, like old times, I knew it wasn't a gesture of kindness. It was a setup. Still, I went. Not because I expected reconciliation. I went to observe. Her house looked the same, like a showroom frozen in time. Inside, the air smelled like lemon cleaner and judgment. The dining table was set for 4, Kaylin, Thorne, Solana, and me. Solana sat at the far end, plate untouched, gaze unfixed. She didn't smile when she saw me, but she looked relieved. That was enough. Kaylin greeted me with a tight-lipped smirk and a comment that tried to masquerade as civility. "Glad you could finally make time. We've been doing just fine, but Solana's missed your presence." Thorne didn't say anything. Just nodded once, his eyes flicking between me and the table like I was another item on the menu. Conversation stayed surface level. I asked Solana about school. She said it was okay. I asked if she still liked to draw. She shrugged. Her silence wasn't passive, it was coached. Midway through what she called a new family tradition, Kaylin got up and returned with a framed photo. "This just came in," she said, holding it like it was some grand announcement. It was a picture of the 3 of them, Kaylin, Thorne, and Solana, standing in front of a local community center, all smiles. Solana's hand rested on her lap in her chair, while Kaylin knelt beside her, her hand resting on Solana's shoulder in that performative pose people adopt when cameras are near. I wasn't in the photo. "Where's Mommy?" Solana asked, pointing with a soft voice that made my heart splinter. Kaylin didn't flinch. That was a phase we all moved past. I blinked. Solana didn't understand what she meant. But I did. Kaylin turned her gaze to me and pulled another photo from a side drawer. This one was older, Mom's birthday, all of us together. Solana was just 4. I remembered the frosting on her nose, the way she clung to me after the candles went out. Kaylin looked at the photo, then looked at me, and without hesitation, tore it in half, right down the middle. My half fluttered to the ground near my chair. Solana flinched. I sat frozen, swallowing a wave of nausea. Not from the act, but from the smile Kaylin gave afterward, like she'd just completed a task on a to-do list. "I thought we were here to talk," I said, calmly. "Not rewrite the past." "Oh, please," she said. "You clung to that role like it defined you. But it was temporary, Vela, just like everything else you touch." I didn't answer. I stood up, picked up the torn photo half with my face on it, and folded it neatly. "Not everything needs to be whole to matter," I said, sliding the photo into my coat pocket. I stayed for exactly 2 more minutes, long enough to finish my water, long enough to see Solana's eyes follow me. Then I left the table. But before I reached the door, I turned around. I wasn't going to let this lunch end with just another scar. "You can fake smiles in pictures, Kaylin. You can even fake legal documents," I said. "But you can't fake the day our mother signed her will." She tilted her head, amused. "Are you accusing me of something?" "No," I said. "I'm investigating something." That afternoon, I drove to the county clerk's office. I asked for a certified copy of Mom's will. "It was amended," the clerk said. "Processed 4 months ago. Kaylin Voss listed as sole beneficiary, signed and notarized." "Who was the witness?" I asked. The clerk checked. "Thorne Marrow." Of course he was. "Any record of when the amendment was filed?" She showed me the timestamp. That same weekend, Kaylin told me Mom was too sick to see visitors. The weekend she said I should just rest and let the family breathe. Mom was bedridden that weekend, barely able to hold a pen. "You don't forge a future without first erasing someone's past," I whispered under my breath, thanking the clerk and walking out with a copy. I drove straight back to Kaylin's house. Not to start a fight, not to shout, but to return a message. She opened the door like she'd been waiting. "Back so soon?" I stepped in, only enough to meet her eyes. "The past isn't as buried as you think," I said. "And I have a shovel." She smiled like she'd already won. But I walked away knowing the game had just changed. A week had passed since Kaylin ripped my name out of our mother's will, and I hadn't heard a word from her. No apology, no explanation, just silence, sharp and calculated, the kind of silence you weaponize. I stayed in the shared living unit off South Main, where the walls were thin and privacy was a luxury. Most nights, I listened to the woman in the next bunk cry herself to sleep. Most mornings, I reminded myself that I didn't come this far to disappear. I was heating water for instant coffee in the common kitchen when I heard Thorne's voice. I didn't see him, but his voice carries like an oil slick. It spreads fast and leaves a stain. "She's unstable," he said, low and steady into the phone. "Had a breakdown last year. You know, clinic time. PTSD maybe. Definitely not safe for a kid." I froze. He wasn't just gossiping. He was planting seeds, sowing doubt. It wasn't personal. It was strategic. Because in this country, once you're labeled unstable, the truth doesn't walk in the door. It has to be invited, and it usually shows up late. Later that day, I went to Solana's school. I hadn't seen her since that awful lunch. I just wanted to drop off some books she loved, ones with the tabs she used to place between pages to show me her favorite quotes. I thought maybe a teacher would pass them on. The receptionist, who recognized me, hesitated when I gave my name. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice tight. "Ms. Voss submitted paperwork restricting all non-authorized contact." My face didn't move. I just asked, "And I'm not authorized?" She shook her head. I didn't argue. I wrote everything down, her name, the date, the time. Every time they try to erase me, I document the erasure. It's not enough to replace me. They have to rewrite me as dangerous. That night, I was back at the shelter, staring at the screen of my laptop. I hadn't opened email in days. Most messages were junk, but one stood out. No sender, no subject, just a file. I hesitated, clicked. It was footage. Grainy, black and white. Solana's bedroom. She was alone, sitting in her wheelchair, barely moving. The timestamp showed over an hour of footage. No one entered the room. She tried to pull a blanket from the edge of the bed and failed. At one point, she whispered, "Mommy," 3 times. Her voice barely audible, but I heard it. I watched all 63 minutes. She had been left alone for too long. Again and again. I didn't cry because of what I saw. I cried because it confirmed what I already knew. The truth doesn't scream. It watches. It waits. and then it strikes with silence. The next morning, I emailed the video file to Maris, an attorney I had only spoken to once, briefly. I titled the subject line, Guardianship Abuse Evidence, Immediate Review Requested. I didn't add context. The video spoke loud enough. Later that afternoon, while walking to the library for internet access, I passed two women talking outside a grocery store. One said, "It's not that she was a bad mom, she just didn't know how to be a stable one." I didn't know if they were talking about me, but it felt like they were. You can't outshout a lie, but you can outlast it with facts. And I had my first fact. Back in the room, I stared at the cracked ceiling above my cot and thought about all the ways Kaylin had tried to replace me. First in Solana's heart, then on paper, now in memory. But that video, that whispered "mommy," it wasn't just proof. It was permission. If I was toxic, why was she still calling my name? When Kaylin suggested a family check-in, just to level things out, I knew she was playing the long game, the one where she pretends to mediate while tightening her grip. Still, I agreed to show up, not to play along, but to bring the truth with me. The office smelled like paper and stale coffee. We met in one of those neutral family meeting rooms, arranged through the court's counseling division. 4 chairs, 1 round table, 1 counselor who looked too young to know the weight of what was about to unfold. Kaylin was already seated when I arrived, her outfit perfectly curated, a navy blue blouse, pearl earrings, posture like a senator's wife. Thorn hovered behind her like furniture. Solana sat quietly, wheels locked on her chair, hands folded in her lap. She looked up at me once, just once, and then back down at the floor. "Thank you both for coming," the counselor began. Kaylin cut in quickly, smiling like it hurt. "We've just been concerned. Solana's stability is our top priority, and while we recognize Vela's intentions, we need to focus on consistency. Don't we, sweetheart?" She placed a hand gently on Solana's arm, the same hand that ripped up a photo of us a week earlier. "And what would that look like?" I asked calmly, unfolding the folder I brought with me and placing it on the table. Inside were receipts, not opinions, not impressions, just receipts. Years of medical bills, therapy sessions, school IEP meeting logs, adaptive gear purchases, every signature in my name, every date lining up with moments Kaylin said I was absent. Kaylin laughed, soft and sharp. "This isn't about who paid more, Vela." I looked at her evenly. "You hung plaques on your wall. I hung onto my daughter." The counselor said nothing, but the way she leaned closer to my folder said more than words. For once, I wasn't just explaining myself, I was backing it. Kaylin shifted in her seat, reaching for her own papers. I didn't glance at them. I didn't need to. No framed award, no degree, no posed photo of her giving a check to a local shelter could compete with proof of presence. The meeting fizzled shortly after. Kaylin grew tense. The counselor kept her tone neutral, and Solana never looked up again. I left with my folder in hand and drove back to the shelter. The sky hung low with clouds, and the rain came slow. Like it, too, didn't want to be noticed. Back in my room, I pulled out Solana's old schoolwork. I'd stored it in a folder marked Keep Forever. It felt like the right time to revisit the past before the court tried to rewrite it. Tucked between drawings of stick figures and math worksheets was an envelope. Small, unmarked. I opened it, heart in my throat. The letter inside was written in pink marker, slightly smudged at the edges. "If I disappear, don't be sad. Maybe they'll let me see you in the next life." I stopped breathing. The walls around me dissolved. The noise from the hallway disappeared. All I could hear was my daughter's voice in my head, repeating the words in that note, words no child should ever know how to write. I didn't cry like I thought I would. I didn't fall apart. I breathed through it. And when I stood up, I did so with clarity. That note was more than sorrow. It was testimony. A child shouldn't need to leave messages like they're fleeing a war zone. But maybe they were. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat at the desk in the common room, surrounded by fluorescent buzz and rustling papers, scanning every document I owned, labeling files, compiling timelines, highlighting contradictions. They wanted a case. I'd give them a reckoning. By the time I hand in my file, even the judge will wonder who the real parent was. The air in Naperville smelled cleaner than I remembered, sharper, like something was about to be exposed. 3 days had passed since I delivered my file to Maris, and still, no word. Not from Kaylin, not from the court, not from Solana's school. Silence from every direction but my own mind. The investigator's office was tucked inside an old strip mall between a nail salon and a dry cleaner. There was no sign on the door, just the initials WJ etched into a frosted window. I pushed it open and was greeted by a man who looked like he had seen every type of betrayal there was. "Uvela?" he asked. "Yes." "Good. I ran the footage you flagged in your file." He motioned for me to follow him into a dim room filled with monitors and humming towers. He pulled up a video window, time-stamped from 3 months ago, and hit play. There was Solana's bedroom, the hallway, the kitchen, and Kaylin, hair curled, apron tied, ring light on. She was live. Laughing, flipping pancakes on camera for her mommy vlog followers. View count rising in the corner. All smiles, all staged. She said things like, "Motherhood is sacrifice, but it's also structure," and "Sometimes you have to let your kids try things on their own." At minute 28, Solana appeared in the background of the kitchen camera, wobbling slightly in her chair, calling out faintly. Kaylin didn't turn around. She was too busy thanking Sherry from Indiana for a $10 super chat. At minute 30, Solana tried to wheel herself down the hallway, headed toward the stair lift. At minute 31, she reached for the railing, then slipped. The camera didn't capture the fall, but the scream afterward, short, pained, sudden, froze my stomach. "She was live for 36 minutes, the investigator said. "Your daughter fell at minute 28. My hands didn't shake, my voice didn't crack. My rage was quiet and cold. People can forgive mistakes, but this was marketing. The next day, I couldn't focus. I kept thinking about that video, about all the times Kaylin accused me of neglect when it was her spotlight that blinded her to our daughter. And then, like a sickness I had been ignoring, another memory surfaced. 2 months before the lockout, I was in their garage helping move boxes of old toys. Thorne had insisted I take some of Solana's things, said they didn't have space anymore. We were alone. Kaylin had run to pick up takeout. I remember bending to pick up a crate when I felt his hand touch my lower back. Not a helpful pat, something slower, calculated. He leaned in. "Kaylin doesn't see you," he said, voice low. "But I do. I always have." I froze. He didn't press further, didn't say more, but his look said enough. He thought I owed him, thought I was vulnerable enough to let it pass. I walked out, silent, but I never forgot. It explained a lot. It explained why he never defended me, even when he knew the truth. It explained the tone he used when speaking to Solana about me, casual disdain, like I was an inconvenience he'd tolerated long enough. It explained why, no matter what I did right, I was always framed as the threat. They weren't afraid of me. They were afraid of me speaking. That night, I sat in the dim glow of the shelter's hallway with my laptop open. I drafted the most important email of my life, addressed to Maris, CC'd to the court-appointed counselor. Subject: Statement on guardianship negligence and personal harassment. I laid it all out. The live stream, the timeline, the garage, the silence. My tone wasn't desperate. It was deliberate. The truth may be late, but it never loses its power when it arrives. And mine had finally shown up. He wanted me quiet, but this silence has teeth. It was just after 8 a.m. when the knock came at the shelter. I wasn't expecting anyone, least of all someone from my old neighborhood. I opened the door to find Narissa standing there, gray hair tucked under a baseball cap, her weathered face unreadable. "I shouldn't be here," she said, voice hushed. But I watched too long. She held out an old cell phone. I didn't move at first. "I heard things," she added. "No child should hear what I heard." I stepped aside. She didn't come in. She just handed me the phone and said, "Play the voice memo marked Thursday." Then she turned and walked away. The door clicked shut behind me. I sat down on the edge of my cot and hit play. Static. A thud. Then Solana's voice, muffled but clear. "Mommy! Mommy!" No one replied. Then Kaylin's voice came, sharp, snapping through the air like a slap. "She's not even your real mother anymore, so stop crying about her." I didn't flinch. I didn't cry. I replayed it twice. You don't need a courtroom when the walls themselves have testimonies. That afternoon, I was back in Maris's office. The audio played in a closed-door session with a mediator present. I watched their expressions shift, not with shock, but with something worse. Recognition. Like they'd heard similar stories before and had been waiting for the evidence to match the suspicion. "This wasn't collected for drama," Maris said calmly. "It was collected out of guilt." The mediator didn't respond, but her fingers stopped typing. Her eyes lingered on mine longer than they needed to. It was the first time I felt like someone besides me saw the cracks in Kaylin's perfect portrait. Later that night, after hours of typing and sorting, Maris's legal assistant and I met behind Kaylin's house. Nothing illegal. The trash was curbside, in full public view. We wore gloves, worked silently. By midnight, we had it, a torn-up custody modification form. My signature, real from 2 years ago, scanned and printed on it, but the dates had been redacted with black marker, and Kaylin's penmanship was all over the margins. She tried to backdate it, reshape it, rewrite me. A lie isn't buried, it's recycled. I bagged every page, took high-resolution photos, and labeled them with timestamps. As I sealed the last bag, my breath visible in the cool night air, I whispered to no one in particular, "She didn't just erase me from life. She erased me from paper." The next morning, we stood in front of the judge's chambers. Maris handed over 2 separate evidence packets, one labeled audio, the other physical. The clerk didn't ask questions, just took them, signed the receipt, and buzzed us in. "Your Honor," Maris began, "these are materials relevant to the emergency reassessment of guardianship and character claims." The judge raised an eyebrow, but accepted the folders. Outside the courtroom, Kaylin arrived 10 minutes later, her hair too perfect, her smile too tight. She wore her usual "I'm a victim" expression. She didn't know what had just landed on the judge's desk. She still thought she was controlling the narrative. Some people burn bridges, others leave receipts. By this time tomorrow, Kaylin wouldn't be preparing statements. She'd be preparing defenses. The flash drive came in an unmarked envelope slipped beneath the door of my shelter room. No note, no sender, just that cold, metallic weight in my hand, buzzing with a promise I didn't ask for, but knew I'd use. I plugged it into the community computer and pressed play. The audio file was grainy, distorted slightly by distance, but the voice was unmistakable. "She's pathetic. I took everything from her and she still thinks she has a chance." Kaylin. Another voice, maybe a friend's, laughed awkwardly in the background, like they knew it had gone too far, but didn't want to say so. Then came the line that twisted my gut into a knot. "That kid's better off without a mother who breaks every time life sneezes at her." I paused it there. My hand didn't shake. My eyes didn't blink. A confession made in cruelty still counts in court. Later that day, I sat across from Maris in her office. She listened to the entire recording without stopping. When it ended, she removed her glasses and said, "We won't even need to raise our voice. This file does all the shouting." She didn't mean it as a victory speech. There was no celebration in her voice, just resolve. "Let's add this to the formal package," she continued. "Supplementary exhibit." It wasn't about vengeance anymore. It was about restoring my name. I walked out of her office into the parking lot, where wind tangled in my hair and the world felt oddly still. But the stillness didn't last. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw him. Andrew, my first attorney. He was walking toward the cafe next door. I stepped into his path. He stiffened when he saw me. "We need to talk," I said flatly. Vela, I'm really sorry about how things turned out. Don't. Just tell me what she gave you." He hesitated, then shrugged. "She offered more than just money. She offered connections. Told me I'd be part of something big if I made this go away quietly. I nodded once. I didn't need more. I didn't need him to grovel. Some people practice law, I said. Others practice justice. I'm glad I found one who still knows the difference. That night, back in the shelter, I sat at the folding table in the common room. Around me, people whispered about meals and missed calls, about lost jobs and second chances. But I focused on my file. Folders were labeled in red ink. Audio. Surveillance. Custody. Each page was time-stamped, every exhibit cross-referenced. I had facts, dates, signatures. I had her words, her negligence, her laugh. What Kaylin didn't know was that her biggest mistake wasn't underestimating me. It was assuming silence meant surrender. She used my silence as weakness. Now she'll learn what I built in it. Tomorrow, I don't walk into that courtroom alone. I walk in with every lie she's ever told. I arrived early, not because I wanted to be the first in the building, but because I didn't want to be the last one to face what was coming. DuPage County Family Court loomed like a place built to settle ghosts. The stone walls didn't just hold records, they held regrets. As I sat outside the courtroom with my folder clutched tight, I saw a figure moving down the hallway. At first, I didn't register who it was. But the walk, the shoulders slightly hunched from years of silence, that I remembered. My father. He hadn't spoken to me since Mom's funeral. Hadn't sent a birthday card. But now he walked toward me slowly, holding a manila envelope like it weighed as much as an apology. "Your mother gave me this before she passed," he said. His voice was rougher than I remembered. I didn't do much right. But I can do this. He handed me the envelope. Inside were notarized documents, original guardianship papers, and a deed with my name still listed. The same ones Kaylin had claimed were amended. The signatures were real. The dates were earlier than any of Kaylin's edits. My knees didn't buckle, but something inside me stood a little straighter. Sometimes the last one to show up still shows up on time. Court began exactly at 9. The judge, a woman with eyes that didn't miss much, called both parties forward. Kaylin sat with her high-priced attorney, all pearls and posture. I sat with Maris, no frills, no makeup, just facts. "We have newly submitted evidence regarding guardianship and property rights," Maris said, presented by Mr. Oberon Mercy, father of the plaintiff. The judge reviewed the papers. Her brows drew close. She paused. "These documents contradict the most recent amendment submitted by the defense," she said. Kaylin shifted. Her smile tightened. The judge ordered a recess to verify authenticity. Outside the courtroom, Kaylin hissed at her lawyer, voice just low enough to sound desperate. "How did they even find that? He wasn't supposed to keep copies." She built her empire on my silence. He just brought the demolition order. Back in session, things unraveled quickly. The court reviewed financial records, bank withdrawals made from my personal account during the months I was in recovery. Months I was unreachable, buried in grief, therapy, medication. Maris stood, calm and clear. "Your Honor, these withdrawals were made using an outdated joint authorization from a shared account years ago, closed without Ms. Mercy's knowledge while she was under medical care." The judge turned to Kaylin's side. "Can you explain this?" Her lawyer tried. Kaylin stayed quiet, but her eyes darted. I didn't raise my voice. I just looked at her. And I saw it, the crack. There are two kinds of theft, the kind that takes money and the kind that takes dignity. She took both. The judge adjourned the hearing temporarily, pending a formal investigation into document tampering and financial abuse. As the courtroom emptied, Kaylin leaned into her lawyer, whispering furiously. Her face lost its performative glow. She wasn't unraveling, she was being unmasked. I didn't feel triumphant, I felt accurate. I felt realigned with the truth I had always known but couldn't prove. Until now. Tomorrow, custody would be decided. But today, accountability finally showed up. The courtroom was colder than usual. Or maybe it was just me, holding my breath long enough to feel ice settling in my lungs. We were all there. Kaylin with her attorney, rigid in posture and expressionless in face. Thorne, leaning forward slightly like he thought posture made him credible. Maris sat beside me, calm and steady, her notepad open but untouched. The judge entered, eyes scanning each table with the kind of gaze that suggested she already knew more than she was letting on. "Today, the court will hear from the minor, Solana Mercy," she said. "Let it be clear, we are not asking her to choose a future, we are asking her to tell the truth about her present." I looked down at my lap. I wanted to meet Solana's eyes when she entered, but part of me wasn't ready, not because I doubted her, but because I wasn't sure my heart could take it. She rolled into the room on her own. No assistant, no guiding hand, just her, in her wheelchair, chin up, back straight. The child Kaylin called helpless, now driving herself into the room with more courage than most grown adults. The judge leaned gently toward her. "Solana, sweetie, we're just going to talk a little, okay?" She nodded. The child advocate stood behind her. She whispered something that made Solana nod again. "Can you tell us," the judge began softly, "where you feel safe?" The room fell silent. Solana glanced around, at me, at Kaylin, at the advocate, then back at the judge. "With Mommy," she said. I didn't cry, I didn't move, but something in me cracked open just enough to let air in again. The judge smiled gently. "Why do you feel safe there?" "Because she listens, and she doesn't clap when people yell at me." Gasps came from the back of the courtroom, people who'd never heard that part of our story, people who hadn't been on that porch with me when the door closed and the curtain didn't even twitch. Kaylin didn't react. She stayed still, eyes forward, frozen in her own narrative. Thorne looked at the floor. My daughter had just told the truth in a room where truth often gets filtered through agendas. Children don't lie with words, they lie with silence. But today, my daughter spoke. The judge thanked Solana, then asked if she wanted to remain in the room. "No, thank you," Solana replied politely. She wheeled herself out, back straight, eyes forward. No cross-examination followed. No one dared. The judge called for a recess. Maris didn't speak right away. Neither did I. I exhaled and leaned back in my seat. She was never supposed to carry this burden, but she did, and she didn't let it crush her. Out in the hallway, the air felt different. Not lighter exactly, but clearer, like the weight had been shifted just enough to breathe. Maris joined me near the windows that looked out over the parking lot. "Win or lose tomorrow," she said. "Today she gave you back your name." I nodded, eyes still fixed on the gray sky beyond the glass. She gave me more than that. She reminded me that truth doesn't ask permission. It walks in when it's ready. And tomorrow, the law will either echo her voice or silence it. The courtroom doors closed behind me with the kind of finality I could feel in my spine. Every seat was filled. I didn't search the room for Kaylin or Thorne. I didn't need to. The noise of their presence had already faded in my life. Solana sat with her advocate near the back, her small frame composed, her eyes watching everything. She knew it mattered. She knew something was about to change. The judge entered, file in hand, eyes heavier than usual. "This court has reviewed every piece of evidence," she began. "Every testimony, every silence. The conclusion is as unavoidable as it is unsettling." She paused and looked directly at Kaylin. "The court finds that the emotional, legal, and ethical concerns raised by Miss Mercy are not only substantiated, but disturbing." Kaylin didn't move. Her hands stayed folded in her lap like she still believed she could pray her way out of this. "The court awards full legal and physical custody of Solana Mercy to her biological mother, Vela Mercy," the judge continued, her voice firm but not cruel. "Furthermore, this court orders a formal investigation into allegations of document tampering, financial abuse, and custodial negligence." Maris reached over and gave my wrist the slightest squeeze. I didn't smile. I just exhaled. Justice was never about applause. Before the room could clear, I stood. "Your Honor," I said quietly, "I have one more item." The judge gestured for the clerk. I handed over the flash drive I'd carried with me for weeks, my mother's final message. The judge nodded and asked that it be played in chambers. Later, I was told what she saw. My mother sat in a rocking chair on the screen, her hands clasped. Her voice, worn but strong, filled the judge's office. "If I'm gone before she grows up, promise me you'll never let Vela's daughter be raised to forget who her real mother is." She's soft, but don't mistake that for weak. Even the dead leave instructions when they know the living will forget who mattered. When I exited the courthouse, Solana wheeled beside me, her hand tucked in mine. The crowd outside parted slightly, flashbulbs flickered, voices rose, asking if I had a comment, if I'd consider an interview. I kept walking. Maris leaned close. "You just changed the definition of mother for everyone watching." I didn't look at the cameras. I looked at Solana. "Let's go home," I whispered. We reached the car, my old one, the one Kaylin called embarrassing. Solana laughed when she saw the duct tape still holding one side of the rearview mirror. "Some things don't need to be perfect," she said. "They just need to show up," I replied. In the back seat was a framed photo I'd repaired, the one Kaylin had ripped in half. Now it had tape lines and fingerprints and, tucked into one corner, a crayon drawing Solana made last night. 3 stick figures, one in a wheelchair, all holding hands. That night, in our new apartment, modest, quiet, safe, I made pasta while Solana sat at the table sketching. Sunlight spilled through the blinds. I watched her. Whole, steady, free. I didn't fight to prove I was good. I fought so she'd never think she wasn't worth fighting for. The truth didn't set me free. It set the record straight. And if they ever come back to knock, there won't be a door to open.